What would you do if your own children declared you too old, took over your money, and even decided your husband's fate, all while smiling and telling you it was for your own good? That's what happened to me. One moment, I was still paying bills, caring for my husband Arthur, and managing my home. The next, my children were treating me as if my thoughts no longer mattered. They told me I was overwhelmed, too fragile, too forgetful to make decisions. Suddenly, I had to ask permission just to buy a sweater or treat myself to lunch. But what they didn't know was that I had something they could never touch. A small, ordinary brass key tucked away in my old purse. The very thing they dismissed me for, my age, gave me the patience and strength to wait for the right moment. And when I walked into that bank with the key in my hand, I knew my time had come. I can still see that morning in my mind. The cold metal pressed against my palm as I stood at the counter. My children thought they had shut every door, stripped me of every choice. But they had no idea that Arthur, my husband, the man they thought was fading away, had left me one final safeguard, and I was about to use it. Have you ever been treated as if your years erased your wisdom? As if every wrinkle on your face meant your voice carried less weight? I know many of you listening right now have felt that sting. Maybe someone told you, kindly but firmly, to let others handle things. Maybe you've seen friends lose control of their homes, their savings, their dignity, all because their family said they were too old. That was the cage I found myself in. But deep down, I refused to believe age meant weakness. My own children convinced the world that I couldn't be trusted. They said I was too fragile, too confused to manage money. And the bank believed them. I walked in one afternoon, only to be told my small savings account, the one I had kept hidden for years, was closed. Not by me, but by my son. He used a legal paper to claim I was no longer capable. That moment cut deeper than any insult I had ever known. It wasn't just money they took. It was my independence, my dignity, my voice. And I have to ask you, if this were your story, if your own children or family tried to silence you, would you let them succeed? Or would you fight to prove you're still strong enough to decide your own future? Strong women don't let their voices be silenced. If you believe wisdom doesn't fade with age, hit subscribe right now. And if you feel you can't subscribe, at least go into the comments and tell us why, because staying quiet makes the world think stories like mine don't matter. That day at the bank, when they told me I no longer had a say, I walked out with shaking hands. But those tremors weren't from fear. They were from a storm rising inside me. I had spent my life being careful, loyal, and trusting. Now, I was being treated as if I had nothing left but confusion. What my children didn't realize was that I was far more patient than they were. I knew how to keep quiet, how to wait, how to let them believe they had one. And all the while, that little brass key never left my purse. It wasn't just metal. It was proof. Proof that Arthur had trusted me, even when no one else did. Proof that my life was not theirs to control. They thought they had stripped me of everything. But the truth is, they had given me the one thing I needed most, a reason to fight. And my fight was only beginning. For most of my life, I believed I had it all figured out. Arthur and I built our home with our own hands, our own sweat, and our own laughter. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Every brick in the house carried a memory. The night we painted the living room until sunrise, the mornings we sat on the porch with coffee while the children played in the yard. Robert and Martha grew up knowing a home filled with love, and later, our grandchildren brought even more joy. I lived those years believing that the strongest foundation of all was family. Arthur was the kind of man who never forgot a date. He remembered every birthday, every anniversary, and even the silly milestones, like the first time I baked a pie without burning it. He was my anchor, steady and dependable. I handled the finances. He handled the things that required strength. We worked as a team, and it felt like nothing could break us. But life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. The day the doctor told us Arthur had Alzheimer's, my world tilted. At first, I thought, no, this can't be right. He just misplaced his keys. But soon it was undeniable. He forgot simple words, got lost in his own stories, and sometimes didn't recognize faces that should have been familiar. He was still physically there, my husband, my partner, but piece by piece, the man I knew was slipping away. With that cruel diagnosis came the avalanche of bills. Doctor visits, medication, special treatments. It was as if our careful savings were being swallowed whole. I did what I had always done: budgeted, calculated, and kept track of every cent. I prided myself on knowing where our money went, and I believed I could handle it. But caring for Arthur was exhausting. Nights without sleep, endless phone calls with insurance, stacks of papers taller than any cookbook I'd ever owned. My mind was sharp, but the weight was heavy. Then I made one mistake. I paid a bill twice. Just a few $100s. To me, it was nothing more than a slip. To my children, it was proof. Robert noticed first. "Mom, are you sure you're keeping up with everything?" he asked, his voice carrying that tone children use when they think they're the parent. Martha followed soon after, more direct. "Dad's getting worse, Mom. And you're not getting younger. Maybe you should let us help." Help. Such a simple word. Wrapped in concern, but layered with something else. I told myself they meant well. I told myself they were protecting me. But that word was the first chain around my freedom. At first, I resisted. "I can handle it," I said. But the long nights and endless worry had worn me down. So when they proposed a joint account, "Just to make things easier, Mom," I agreed. I signed the papers, believing I was lightening my burden. What I didn't see then was how I was placing a lock on my own cage and handing my children the key. Not long after, the changes began. Subtle at first. I wanted to buy a sweater, something simple, nothing extravagant. But when I asked Martha for the money, she paused. "Do you really need it, Mom? We have to be careful." When I mentioned taking my friend Agnes out for lunch, Robert chimed in, "Maybe somewhere cheaper, Mom. We need to be mindful." In those moments, I felt smaller than I had in decades. I had raised them to be independent, to stand on their own 2 feet. Yet here I was, a grown woman in her 70s, reduced to asking permission like a child begging for allowance. I had always been proud of my self-reliance. Now I was a guest in my own life. Every purchase, every decision, weighed against their judgment. My life wasn't mine anymore. And it stung even more because it came from them, my children. The same ones whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose school lunches I had packed, whose dreams I had supported. They had turned my love into leverage. I tried to convince myself it was temporary, that they truly had my best interests at heart. But every "Are you sure, Mom?" and every "Maybe that's not a good idea" carved a little deeper into my pride. The truth was clear. I was no longer trusted. And that realization brought a pain sharper than any doctor's diagnosis. If you've ever seen someone's independence taken away just because of age, subscribe so stories like this never go unheard. And if you choose not to, at least leave a comment explaining why you'd rather stay quiet, because silence helps those who take advantage. For years, I kept a little secret tucked away, not in a drawer or under the mattress, but in the bank. A small savings account, nothing grand. Just a few $1,000s I had scraped together from birthday money, careful budgeting, and the occasional indulgence I denied myself. I called it my rainy day fund, though sometimes I like to think of it as my sunny afternoon account, money set aside for the moments when I wanted to feel free again. A trip to the garden store, a weekend outing with friends, or perhaps something simple like a set of fresh sheets. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And more than the money, it represented independence. It was proof that even if the world tried to box me in, I still had something that belonged only to me. One afternoon, not long after the joint account was created, I decided to withdraw from that secret stash. Arthur's care was weighing on me, and I thought a little treat for myself might ease the burden. Something small. Something that reminded me I was still me. I walked into the bank with confidence, clutching my passbook, ready to ask for a withdrawal. The young teller smiled politely and typed my name into her computer. But then her expression softened, almost like she was about to deliver bad news to a child. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Eleanor," she said gently. "Your account was closed last week." Her words hit me harder than I can explain. Closed? I blinked, trying to process what I had just heard. Closed? That's impossible. I didn't close it. The teller glanced at the screen again. Her voice dropped into something careful, almost apologetic. "It was closed by your power of attorney. Your son, Robert." The world around me seemed to tilt. My knees weakened, and for a moment, I gripped the counter to steady myself. "Power of attorney?" I whispered. "Yes," she said softly. "He explained that you were struggling with memory, and it was for your protection." For my protection. My own son had walked into this very bank, claimed that I was incapable, and taken the one piece of financial freedom I had left. I left that building with my heart pounding and my hands trembling. The crisp air outside did nothing to cool the fire inside me. They hadn't just taken money. They had stripped me of the last secret I had, the last reminder that I was still capable. I remember walking home, my purse feeling heavy at my side, every step echoing like a drumbeat of humiliation. I thought of Arthur, sitting in his room, unaware of what was happening. I thought of the decades I had spent caring for these children, giving them everything, teaching them values. And now, they had reduced me to nothing more than a helpless signature on papers they could wield at will. That night, I cried quietly in the kitchen, my tears falling onto the same table where I had once planned birthday parties and family dinners. But when the tears dried, something new took their place: resolve. If they wanted to believe I was weak, then weak I would appear. If they wanted to think I was confused, then confused I would seem. I would play their game, but on my terms. From that moment on, I became someone else in their presence. When Robert explained finances, I nodded vaguely, as though his words were too complex for me. When Martha showed me how to use the television remote, something I'd been handling for decades, I let her believe I was lost. My hands shook when they needed to shake. My memory faltered when it was convenient. To them, I was turning into the frail old woman they pitied. To me, I was gathering information, memorizing details, biding my time. I began listening more carefully, catching the little hints they dropped when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The hushed phone calls, the way Robert's eyes lingered on certain documents, the subtle mentions of Arthur's care. Every detail mattered now, because every detail told me one thing. This was no longer about helping me. It was about control. Have you ever been underestimated because of your age or situation? Share your story below. I know how painful it feels to be dismissed, to have others speak over you as if you no longer matter. But sometimes, that underestimation can be turned into power. That's what I decided to do. The act became second nature. I perfected the vacant smile, the hesitant tone, the pause before answering. They thought they were clever, that they were managing me. But they were simply feeding my performance. Behind their backs, I was alert, watching, waiting for the moment to strike. There were nights when I questioned myself. Could I really pull this off? Could I fight my own children? But every time I looked at Arthur, every time I saw his soft eyes clouded by illness, I knew I had no choice. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was protecting the man who had trusted me with his life. They had closed my account. They had called me incapable. But what they had truly done was light a fire inside me that no paper, no legal claim, and no condescending remark could extinguish. And as I settled deeper into my role as the helpless grandmother, I held one truth close to my heart. They were underestimating the wrong woman. I thought the worst had already happened when Robert closed my secret account. I thought nothing could cut deeper than losing the last piece of independence I had kept hidden. But that humiliation was only the surface. The truth I was about to discover would chill me in a way no cold wind ever could. It began with a phone call. The voice on the other end was polite, a social worker from Arthur's care facility. She told me she was calling to confirm some updates. I listened carefully, though I kept my voice soft and uncertain, the way they expected me to sound. "Your children have approved a new plan for Arthur's treatment," she explained. A few medication adjustments, a shift in his overall care approach. My stomach tightened. "My children approved?" I asked. "Without me. They are listed as his legal decision-makers," she replied. "They've already signed." I forced a frail laugh, playing the part they had cast me in. "Oh dear, I'm not as quick as I used to be. You'll have to speak with Robert and Martha. They handle everything now." When the call ended, I sat frozen, the phone still in my hand. A single thought kept circling my mind. They're not just controlling the money anymore. They're controlling Arthur's very life. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the quiet kitchen, staring at the steam curling from my teacup. Every shadow in the room felt heavier. They had moved past humiliating me. Now, they were making choices about whether my husband lived or died, and they hadn't even bothered to ask me. A week later, my suspicion became proof. Robert was rushing one morning, late for some meeting. He left his briefcase sitting open in the foyer, something he almost never did. My hands hovered over it, my chest tight with guilt. For years, I'd respected privacy. But privacy meant nothing now. They had violated mine over and over. I opened it. Inside were financial records, facility invoices, and medical directives. At first glance, it looked like routine paperwork. But then my eyes caught something wrong. The name of the care facility. Serenity Meadows. Not Princeton Heights. The polished place they had sworn Arthur was living in. My hands trembled as I read further. The cost of Serenity Meadows was less than half of what they told me. But the bill sent to me matched Princeton Heights' higher price. The difference was being funneled into their pockets. I pressed my hand to my chest, fighting the urge to scream. Betrayal over money was one thing. But this? To downgrade their father's care, their own father, just to skim the difference? It was cruelty dressed up as concern. And just when I thought my heart couldn't break more, I found it. A medical directive with their signatures. A do not resuscitate order. A dinner. My knees nearly gave out as I read. The document stated that if Arthur's heart failed, if his breathing stopped, if he couldn't eat, no efforts should be made. No feeding tubes. No resuscitation. No fight. Arthur and I had talked about this long before illness ever touched us. We had promised each other we would fight for every breath, every day together, no matter how hard. This paper erased our promise with one cold stroke of a pen. I slipped the documents back, careful to leave no sign of my search. Outwardly, I returned to being the forgetful old woman, smiling vaguely when they spoke to me. But inside, a fire raged hotter than ever. It's one thing for children to be greedy. It's another for them to gamble with their father's life. From then on, my act became flawless. If Robert explained an investment, I let my eyes glaze over. If Martha told me how to turn on the oven, I nodded as though I couldn't manage it myself. They believed they were in control. They believed I was slipping away. They believed their story about me was true. But every night, when the house was quiet, I sat with a notebook in my lap. Not a real one, they'd never allow that. Instead, I memorized everything. Dates of their whispered phone calls. Names of people they mentioned. Numbers from the invoices I glimpsed. My memory, the very thing they said was failing, became my greatest weapon. There were moments I wanted to explode, to scream in their faces. I know what you're doing. But I swallowed the words. Rage would get me nowhere. Patience would win me everything. The hardest part was looking at Arthur, knowing what they were planning for him. He would smile faintly at me, his eyes clouded but still full of the love we shared. To them, he was a liability. To me, he was still my husband, still the man who built this life with me. And I would not let them steal what little time we had left. I began to see my children differently, not as misguided or overprotective, but as dangerous. Each smile they gave me was a mask. Each "don't worry, Mom" was another nail in the coffin they were building, one signature at a time. The betrayal no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a war. And I was done playing defense. If you're listening right now and you believe no one should decide your worth just because of your age, prove it. Subscribe and stand with me. And if you don't subscribe, at least write in the comments why. Because silence only tells the world you agree with those who see the elderly as powerless. I tell you this because silence is what almost destroyed me. Silence lets them win. And I was determined not to stay silent any longer. They thought I was too weak to resist. But the truth is, I had already begun to resist in the one way they couldn't see. By pretending. By gathering. By waiting. I knew the day would come when all their lies would crumble. I knew the day would come when I would show them I wasn't the fragile woman they thought I was. And that day was closer than they ever imagined. I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. My children had positioned themselves as my guardians, waving legal papers and pretending their control was out of love. But what I had seen in Robert's briefcase told me otherwise. Arthur's life was at risk, and mine was hanging by a thread. The question that kept me awake at night was, who would believe me? To the outside world, I was the frail grandmother who forgot things. Robert and Martha had made sure of that. They had painted a picture of me as someone slipping away, incapable of handling anything beyond knitting or crossword puzzles. But then I remembered Alex. He wasn't a stranger. He had grown up just down the street, a boy who used to sit on my porch while I told him stories. His father was a lawyer, a sharp one, and Alex had followed in his footsteps. I hadn't seen him in years, but I knew in my heart that if anyone would listen, it would be him. I dialed his number late one evening, my hand trembling slightly as I held the phone. His voice answered, deeper now but still carrying that warmth I remembered. Hello. Alex. My voice cracked. It's Eleanor. There was a pause, then a softness that nearly undid me. Mrs. Eleanor? It's been years. How are you? For a moment, I wanted to lie to say I was fine. But I wasn't fine. I was drowning. I need your help, I whispered. I can't explain over the phone. Can you meet me? At the park tomorrow morning. The place we used to feed the ducks. He didn't hesitate. Of course. I'll be there. That night, I barely slept. But for the first time in months, it wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was hope. The next morning, I dressed simply, a cardigan, a skirt, the uniform of the woman they believed me to be. But tucked inside my purse was more than tissues and peppermints. I carried copies of the documents I had seen, the invoices, the DNR, the proof of their deception. My purse had become my shield. When I reached the park, Alex was already waiting. Taller than I remembered, with the sharp suit of a professional man, but the same kind eyes as the boy who once called me his second grandmother. He greeted me with a hug, and for the first time in a long while, I felt safe. We sat on a bench by the pond. My hands trembled as I handed him the papers. They've taken everything, Alex. Not just the money. They've signed things I never agreed to. They moved Arthur without telling me. They're using him to line their pockets. He read in silence, his lawyer's face calm, but I saw the anger building in the set of his jaw. By the time he reached the DNR, his hands were clenched. This is fraud, Eleanor, he said firmly. It's not just wrong. It's criminal. This is elder abuse. Tears pricked my eyes, not of sadness but relief. Someone believed me. Someone saw the truth. But then Alex's expression shifted. I need to check something. He pulled out his phone, tapping quickly, murmuring instructions into it. After a few minutes, he looked back at me, his eyes wide with something that startled me. Eleanor. Arthur had a trust. Did you know about it? I shook my head slowly. No, what kind of trust? A very specific one, Alex explained. An irrevocable trust, created years ago. It's meant to protect you if Arthur became incapacitated. But there's more. If you didn't need the funds for your care, everything was to go to the Alzheimer's Association. My breath caught. A charity? Arthur had always believed in giving back, but I never knew he had gone this far. That meant Robert and Martha weren't just stealing from me. They were stealing from a cause dedicated to fighting the very illness destroying their father. Alex leaned closer, his voice low and urgent. But that's not all. The trust also mentions a private safe deposit box in your name. It holds Arthur's original will and a separate power of attorney, one that overrides the documents your children are waving around. For a moment, I couldn't speak. 1,000 memories of Arthur flooded me. His careful nature, the way he always planned ahead, the way he told me, "Don't worry, Ellie. I'll always take care of you." My hand moved instinctively to the lining of my purse. Sewn into it was a tiny pocket, one I had long forgotten about. My fingers brushed against something cold and familiar. A small brass key. I pulled it out slowly, the weight of it grounding me. Arthur, he must have left this for me. He always said to keep this purse close. I thought it was just sentiment. But he knew. Alex's eyes lit up with determination. Eleanor, this key changes everything. With it, we can access the safe deposit box. That will give us the proof to restore your authority and expose what your children have done. I closed my hand tightly around the key, my tears falling freely now. All this time they thought I was weak. They thought I was too old to fight back. But Arthur knew. He trusted me. He left me the very tool I need to end this. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt power in my veins again. Not anger, not humiliation, but strength. If you were me, would you have the courage to fight your own children for justice? Tell me in the comments. Alex placed a hand on mine, steady and reassuring. Tomorrow we'll go to the bank together. Not to ask permission, not to beg, but to claim what's rightfully yours. I nodded, my grip on the key tightening. For months, I had played the role of the fragile grandmother, pretending to forget, pretending to stumble. But now the act was over. The key in my hand wasn't just brass. It was Arthur's voice, echoing from beyond, reminding me who I was. And tomorrow, I would use it to reclaim everything they had tried to steal. The morning of the reckoning dawned clear and calm, but inside me, a storm was raging. For months, I had lived in silence, playing their game, letting them believe they had broken me. But that morning, I was no longer their victim. I was the woman Arthur trusted, the woman who had raised those very children, and the woman who still carried the key they never knew existed. Alex picked me up right on time. He looked every bit the lawyer, calm, collected, with a briefcase in his hand, but I could see the fire in his eyes. We didn't speak much on the drive. Words weren't needed. We both knew what had to be done. When we arrived, the bank was busy with its usual rhythm. Customers stood in line. The low hum of conversations filled the air. But for me, the world narrowed to a single purpose. Today, I would take back my life. We were escorted to the private banking section, a place I had rarely been. The room smelled faintly of polished wood, the kind of space meant to intimidate. A banker in a tailored suit greeted us with the polite smile of a man used to holding power. "How may I help you today?" he asked, his eyes sliding past me as if Alex were the only one worth addressing. Alex spoke firmly. "My client, Mrs. Eleanor, would like to access her safe deposit box." The banker's brows knit together. "I'm sorry, sir, but our records don't show any safe deposit boxes under her name. Perhaps her children." That word, children, sent a wave of cold anger through me. I reached into my purse, my hand closing around the brass key Arthur had left for me. Slowly, deliberately, I placed it on the desk. "My children don't know everything," I said, my voice steady. "This is for box 217. I'd like it open now." The banker looked at the key, then at me, surprise flickering in his eyes. He excused himself quickly, returning a few minutes later with the head of private banking. This man, older and sterner, carried an old ledger in his hands. He flipped through the pages, scanning carefully. Then he looked up, his tone respectful now. "Mrs. Eleanor," he said, "you are correct. Box 217 is registered to you and your late husband. Please come with me." For the first time in months, I lifted my chin and walked with pride. The heavy vault door opened with a mechanical hiss, revealing rows of boxes. The banker guided us to a private room, placed the box on the table, and left us alone. My hands shook as I slid the key into the lock. Not with fear this time, but with anticipation. The lock clicked open, and I lifted the lid. Inside lay 2 items, a stack of documents and a sealed envelope. My breath caught in my throat. The documents were Arthur's will and a new power of attorney, one that granted me full control of everything. Every account, every property, every decision. The will left no room for doubt. I was the rightful heir to our life's work, and our children had no claim. I passed the papers to Alex, who scanned them quickly. His face broke into a rare smile. "This is it, Eleanor. With this, you hold all the authority. Their power is gone." With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in Arthur's familiar hand. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means you've discovered what I feared most. I created this trust not because I doubted you, but because I doubted them. I saw the hunger in their eyes long before this day. I wanted to make sure you would always have the final word. You were my partner in everything, and I trust you to protect not just yourself, but the legacy we built together. Use this will to reclaim your life. Use this key to remember who you are. And know that I loved you until my last breath. Yours always, Arthur." The tears came then, not from sadness, but from strength. Arthur hadn't left me unprotected. He had left me armed. As Alex and I stepped out of that room, I no longer felt small. I no longer felt fragile. I felt like the woman Arthur knew me to be. We went straight to the lawyer's office to begin restoring everything my children had stolen. The phone rang not long after. Robert's voice, sharp and furious, filled my ear. "Mom, what is this?" "The bank called. You can't just undo everything. We had it all arranged." I let him rant, my silence cutting him off more effectively than any interruption. Then, when he finally paused for breath, I spoke. My voice was calm, clear, and stronger than it had been in years. "I'm not undoing anything, Robert. I'm restoring it. Your father and I built a life together. You tried to dismantle it. But today I took it back." There was silence on the other end, the kind that drips with disbelief. I almost smiled. "They said I was too old to handle money," I continued. "But I proved I was strong enough to change my fate. If you believe you're stronger than what the world says about you, subscribe right now. And if you won't, then tell us in the comments why you'd rather stay silent, because silence only hands victory to those who betray us." I ended the call, my hand steady, my heart lighter than it had been in months. That day at the bank was not just about reclaiming money or authority. It was about reclaiming myself, my dignity, my voice, my place in this world. Arthur's letter was right. The key wasn't just brass. It was a reminder that love and foresight are stronger than greed and betrayal. My children thought they had silenced me. Instead, they had handed me the stage where I proved them wrong. And as I walked out of that bank, documents in hand and my head held high, I knew this fight was far from over. But the victory had already begun. The day after the bank, the tide shifted completely. Alex moved quickly, filing the paperwork that restored my legal authority and stripped Robert and Martha of their power. For months, they had walked around like rulers of my life. In one afternoon, their empire crumbled. I didn't need to shout or slam doors to see their downfall. The law handled that for me. Fraud, financial exploitation, falsifying directives. Their list of sins was long, and Alex made sure every one of them was documented. When the letters from the court arrived, Robert stormed into my house, red-faced and shaking. Martha followed, her voice shrill, begging me to be reasonable. But I didn't falter. I had Arthur's will in one hand and his letter in my heart. For once, I didn't tremble. They did. The legal process was swift. Their guardianship was revoked. Their access to my accounts was terminated. The facility bills were corrected, and Arthur was moved to the dignified center he had always deserved. Robert and Martha faced the very thing they had tried to avoid their whole lives: accountability. They weren't just shamed as selfish children. They were investigated as criminals. For once, they couldn't hide behind polite smiles or clever excuses. The world saw them for who they had become. And me? I was free again. Free to walk into a store and buy what I needed without asking permission. Free to sit with Arthur without fearing some hidden directive would cut his life short. Free to look at myself in the mirror and see not a helpless old woman, but Eleanor, wife, mother, fighter. Arthur's trust did more than protect me. It gave me the chance to fulfill his last wish. After ensuring my needs were secure, I honored him by sending part of the restored funds to the Alzheimer's Association. Writing that check brought tears to my eyes. This illness had stolen so much from us, but through that donation, we gave others a chance to fight back. It was Arthur's way of still helping, even from beyond. Sometimes late at night, I hold his letter in my hands. I trace the lines of his handwriting, feeling the strength behind every word. You were my partner in everything, and I trust you. That trust carried me through the darkest days. Robert and Martha thought they had silenced me. But in truth, they awakened me. They forced me to remember who I truly am. They said I was too old to handle money, too old to make decisions, too old to matter. But I proved them wrong. I remembered who I am. And to you, listening to my story, never let anyone write your ending before you've had your say. Age doesn't erase your voice. Circumstances don't erase your worth. Betrayal doesn't erase your strength. If you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever been told you're past your time, let my story remind you, you are never too old to fight for dignity. Never too old to protect love. Never too old to win back what is rightfully yours. I reclaimed my freedom not just for myself, but for every person who has ever been treated as less simply because of the years they carry. So, if this story moved you, share it. Let it travel beyond us, so others know they are not alone. Leave a comment. Tell me if you've ever had to fight back against those who underestimated you. And yes, subscribe so stories like mine are never lost in silence. Because silence is how betrayal thrives. And I refuse to be silent. Thank you for watching.